Before we totally move off of schedules, let's take a look at some of the lesser used schedules. They're still very useful, but you may not use them as often. We've got conduit, two different types of conduit takeoff schedule, and then a conduit fitting schedule, and then an all conduit schedule. So this one, sort of like the master conduit schedule, just shows everything that's in the model. It's not going to filter anything out. The takeoffs by length, either by length by number or length by type and size. These are useful for doing estimating, especially for PC&M jobs. They usually like us to help them with procurement. So you can come in here, look at how much 3-inch PVC you have in your project. This one we've got 52 feet. We've got 3 feet of 2-inch galvanized, 30 feet of 3/4 inch galvanized. This is a real quick way to come up with requisition estimate. The length by conduit number, this one is especially useful for coming up with cable lengths. Let's look at the definition. This one's not sorting properly. We need to make sure that's sorted by conduit number. There we go. So the way this one would work for wire lengths is, if you know you have a cable that goes through C100, 102, and 103, you would just add up the lengths for those conduit numbers, include any spool lengths that you might need, and that's your estimated cable length. And from there you can write up an estimate for procuring cable sizes, or cable lengths. What's next? Oh, the conduit fitting takeoff. This one's very useful, especially for especially for calling out large size sweeps. Take a look here that you've got galvanized rigid 3-inch on each end, 36-inch radius. You got 8 of those. So if you had a variety of these, they would all show up here, and you can then go ahead and purchase those. Excuse me. The one thing you want to this method doesn't really allow you to place the conduit's fittings on your conduit schedule, mostly because the schedule doesn't let you sort by size. If you wanted to do something where you wanted to show, let's say you have a floor plan, and you wanted to call out this as a specific size sweep, right? You wanted to have a nice part number call out. So you went over here to annotate, and you want to use the part number tag just to show that this sweep is a specific size sweep. You want to attach the radius of this sweep to a part number. You can do it. It takes a little more finessing, a little more data manipulation. It is possible. The limitation, though, is that Revit won't allow you to filter these fittings out by size. So if you wanted to show a specific breakdown of sweeps and the size of each sweep, then that you need to use the conduit takeoff. But let's just say you want to have an entry in your conduit schedule, or in your equipment schedule, that says something like part number 12 is going to be a 36-inch sweep, and then see the conduit takeoff for the specific size. You can do that. It takes, like I said, it takes a little more manipulation, but let's walk through how you would sort of tweak the model data to schedule something that is not, ideally scheduled that way, but just to demonstrate how you would go about that process. So if we look at the equipment schedule, let's look at the entire equipment schedule. Right now, the large size sweeps are all grouped under this resizable radius GRC, right? If we look back at our conduit definition for the 48-inch sweep, it's using that resizable radius sweep. 36-inch, it's using that resizable radius. What we can do is we can create a custom type for that resizable radius and assign it just to these 36-inch sweep type conduits. So to get that going, find the resizable radius elbow, Right now there's only one type underneath it. So we're going to create a new type of that conduit, that radius, resizable radius elbow. And what we're going to do is we're just going to name it a 36-inch, excuse me, 36-inch sweep. And for good measure, we're going to create a new one for the 48-inch sweep. Now, if you look at the definition, there's really nothing is defined in that type except for the name, which is fine. We're just using this as a flag to help us filter the information on the conduit schedule, or rather the equipment schedule. So now we have a new type. Let's go into the, we have two new types rather. Let's go into the conduit type, and we're going to reassign the bend not just to any generic radius, but to a 36-inch resizable radius. Now this works because, if you'll recall, we set our bend properties to a fixed 36 inches on all this conduit type. If that didn't happen, we really wouldn't be able to say that these are going to be forced to be 36 inches. They could be anything because they're resizable. But because we created a standard that uses a fixed 36 inches, we can rely on that parameter definition to constrain the values of these resizable radiuses and guarantee that we're only going to have 36-inch sweeps in this type of run. So it takes a little bit of sort of cognizance of what Revit is doing and how you're using your data and what your constraints are, so that you don't end up publishing a schedule that doesn't accurately match what's in your model. But if you keep some of these things in mind, you can sort of massage Revit to give you what you want. Excuse me. Okay, so we've got a 36-inch sweep assigned to this 36-inch sweep conduit type. We'll do the same thing for the 48-inch. Get rid of that superfluous number. We'll look at the type definition. And for the type definition of the 48-inch sweep conduit type, we'll add just the 48-inch resizable radius. Now what we have to do is actually apply these types to the existing conduits so that they they'll force this conduit to change to the new type that we've selected. So because if you look right now, it's still using the existing just generic resizable radius. So what we can do is, let's highlight this conduit run. 3D view might be a little bit better. Filter out everything that isn't conduits. And now we're going to, we want to keep the same type. If we look, why don't we filter out the fittings? If we look at just the conduits, it's the same type that we want. It's just that we know that we've changed that type to now include a custom fitting. So what we do is we just click reapply type, and actually select the whole run, and then do reapply type. So it didn't actually change anything. The drawing was already made, but now you notice that these generic resizable radius sweeps have been now forced to 36-inch sweeps, I'm sorry. Now if we look in the equipment schedule, we now show the 36-inch sweeps have been specifically included in the model. So we can give them a generic description. We'll call them GRC conduit sweeps, 36-inch radius. Again, Revit can't, this is as far as you can push Revit. It can't filter on specific sizes, so you'd have to do, this would just include all sizes, and you would have a note to see the conduit fitting take off. So I mean, this is why I said it doesn't really save you much, because You still have to include a conduit fitting schedule to show how many of each size that you want. But if you now that you've gone through this whole process, you now have a part number to assign to those conduit fittings. And if you go back to your floor plan, you can now assign a part number tag to those elbows. Honestly, it may be easier just to add a text note that says, for these conduits, see the conduit schedule or the conduit fitting takeoff to verify the radius size. But again, it does allow you to do that. It's just an example of what you can push Revit to do, that it's not really trying to make your life easier. And again, reapplying the type. I'm not sure how well we covered that during the conduit section, but since we're looking at it here, let's say you want to change these now to 48-inch sweeps. We can select a conduit run, change the type to now 48-inch sweep. But because of the constraints, this is usually what will happen. You get it tells you that it can't do that. There's not enough room. It's harder to go larger. You can usually go smaller without too much trouble. So let's go ahead and we'll create a 24-inch radius sweep. We'll go in here. We'll create a new type. 24-inch elbow. Again, this is just if we want to add a part number. That's not really required in general. The real step is to create a conduit type that uses the right standard. So we'll duplicate this one, the 36-inch sweep, change it to 24. Everything else should be the same. We got 24-inch sweep description, 24-inch sweep in the conduit type. So that's fine. So then we will go ahead and highlight this run, this inside run here. And we will change that type to the 24-inch sweep. Again, Revit's usually more forgiving. Let's see, what are we using now? What did we do? What are we doing here? Sorry, I got a little confused there. Oh, it did change it, yeah. Didn't even notice. This should be a 24-inch. Yeah, it is. It's a 24-inch bend. So yeah, it went through and it just made the change for us. You can see that the radiuses are now smaller. The problem with using smaller radiuses is that it's going to conflict every once in a while. Like it's conflicting with this this existing bend. So if we were going to do that for a production set, we'd have to go then into the plan view and tweak a little bit, but it does allow us to sort of automatically change all the fittings that we're using. So you see here, this is now a 24-inch, but the spacing is a little off. We can either probably won't let us move this too easily. Yeah, so if we were going to use this, we'd have to go ahead and fix this, kind of adjust the conduit connections here so that we've moved away from this conflict here. I'm not going to spend time with that. That's something I'll leave for you on your own time, but that's just an example of how to change the type of an existing conduit run. So That's kind of off topic. We were talking about doing the conduit fitting takeoffs, but you can see here now that you've got 24-inch radius, 36-inch radius, and looks like we duplicated the type here. So we may want to change that. We'll go ahead and we will change that type to the other sweep. How does that look? Ah, that's the problem. That one's still using the 24-inch sweep. So change the definition there so that it's using the right size sweep. Reapply that type now. Yeah, now it's changed to the 24-inch sleeves, but again, you got the conflict, so you'll have to spend some time readjusting everything so that the conduits aren't running into each other. But that should conclude most of what we have to talk about regarding scheduling equipment, scheduling conduit, as well as coming up with material takeoffs for the various size conduit. And that's the one thing that you have to, if you do want to schedule your conduit fittings, you have to do them separately, because there's really no way, as we mentioned, within the equipment schedule to filter the conduits by size. It just doesn't, it doesn't let you pull out that size parameter.